Today, we're putting Fender's main two piano bass models against each other to see their individual strengths and weaknesses and to help you decide which one is best for you. Running through the numbers, these are both 32 key piano basses designed to accompany an acoustic piano in lieu of a bass player. This one was made in 1966 and this one was made in 1971. So a roughly 5-year difference, but a vast change in how they play and how they sound. Today, I'm going to show you a little bit on the mechanics and how they changed, and then in the end, we're going to go through a sound demo so you can have a good comparison of what's really important. First, let's start with the cosmetics. The 1966 piano bass has a notably slimmer and less tall design, especially in the lid. Personally, I really like this look, and it does come a little bit lighter than the later 71 models. Also, you can see the front mirror rail is very distinct, and a lot of people prefer that over the aluminum or brushed steel post-70 name rail. Taking a look at the 71, you'll notice the lid is taller, along with the name rail that is not mirrored, which thankfully does not attract fingerprints. You can also see the piano bass logo on the top right. It is a little bit larger, tall-wise. They are both roughly the same size, width, and depth, but their height varies a little bit, and that does add to a little bit more weight. We're talking less than 5 pounds. Taking off the fiberglass lids, you will see the difference between the tone bars first. These rods here are the tone bars, which sustain the note when the tine under it is hit by the hammer. It does this by having a spring mechanism which isolates it from the harp, which is the piece of wood that it's mounted on, thus letting it ring out more rather than a traditional reed sounding mechanism like a Wurlitzer or a Hohner. The pre-70s tone bars have a squared off, harsh shape, along with a lot more dense and harder tine, producing a distinctly different tone from the post-70s models. The post-70s tines and tone bars are a lot more flexible, and the tone bars are shaped a lot more like a tuning fork, providing easier tunability because you can get in there with it still on rather than having to take off the harp and tune it without the key being able to hit the tine. The tuning mechanisms are the same on both models, just a little spring on the tine which you can move forward and backwards to change the pitch of the note. It is important to note that these pre-1970s Ray Mac tines are no longer produced and can lead to a pretty penny if you need to replace them. Post-70s tines are now produced new, and you can buy them fairly cheaply compared to the older Ray Mac tines. You will also notice a change in how the tone bars and tines are mounted. On the pre-70s models, you have a felt bushing connected to the tone bar, which is then suspended by the spring, while on the post-70s models, it has a rubber grommet separating the the screw from the tone bar, and then the tone bar to the spring. These mounting differences change how the sustain comes out through playing, and it can often lead to the post-70 models having a little bit better sustain and longevity of the note. Post-70s models have a hinge which the harp can move on and stay on the keyboard without being propped somewhere else, while the pre-70s models just come off one piece and there is no hinge, at least to my knowledge, that keeps it on the piano. Now that I have both harps off the key bed, I can take a look at the hammers and show you the differences between both actions. On the 66 model, you'll see the distinct felt hammers compared to what you'll see on the post-70s models, and this leads to a huge change in tone and a lot more authentic feel compared to a pre or post 70s Rhodes. Felt's hammers aren't exactly like an acoustic piano's egg-shaped hammers, but it's as close as you're going to get without getting a full 73 key Rhodes that is pre-70s. You'll also see that the dampers are notably different, which they are mounted on a metal rod instead of just a regular metal thin sheet. The bridle straps are also connected to the metal rods differently than how they are on the post-70s metal sheet dampers. The hammer shank and the hammer butt, along with the flange, are all wood on the pre-70s models. Everything in the action is mostly wood on these models, and the key bed and all of the action rail stuff stay the same on both pre- and post-70s keyboards. Taking a look at the post-1970 keyboard, you can see the distinct change in the hammers going from a plastic quote-unquote hammer shank to the rubber hammer tips. These are replaced hammer tips, but they still do indent fairly quickly due to it being rubber on metal. Taking a look at the dampers, you will see a large change in the size of the felt, along with how the felt is mounted onto the metal strips, glued, rather than being on a little plastic slide system which you can easily adjust, rather than having to bend the metal sheets on the post-70s to get a right action feel. Now, I did mention that the key bed and feel are relatively the same on both of these models, but I do want to make a distinction about these subtle differences that both of these keyboards have there. On my pre-70s model, I have what I think is a post-factory mod, where they added a little piece of wood to the end of the key pedestal to make the hammers come up ever so slightly so that it's less force needed to get the same volume out of a keystroke. On my pre-70s model, there is that built in already, which makes the key pedestal a little bit higher, allowing for a better feel in the action. Now, I don't know if the reason this feels so good is because it's a Buzz Watson model, because it was set up nicely in factory, but I did not need to modify this anymore because I feel the action is perfect on it. Normally, what you would do is you would add a little piece of plastic, usually called a bump mod, to the end of the key pedestal to improve the action by lifting that hammer slightly higher to make it need less force to get the same result out of a keystroke. But I felt that my model did not need it, and I'm not too sure why. I've done it on pretty much every other post-70s Fender Rhodes bass that I've had, but this one did not need it. This one could have used it, but I was a little too keen on keeping it as factory, as original as I could, just because I'm not too set on keeping it, because I don't think I can do it justice here. I don't use piano basses too much in my recordings, and when I do, I don't need this cool and unique of a piano bass to do it with. You definitely could do it, it is an option, but I feel it would make it a little too light on the play-wise. Getting to the main sticker here, I do need to bring up how difficult servicing one of these pre-70s keyboards is. If you have any sort of broken part, it's going to be a lot harder to find pieces and replacements for it than these post-70s models. Way harder. I can barely find any replacement tone bars. I can find some tines, but there is really not a lot out there for someone that's trying to repair anything over just one part. If you're missing hardware, if you're missing any cosmetic things, you might as well start fabricating it yourself, because I don't know who's going to help you. Parts for the pre or the post-70s Rhodes piano bass are really abundant because it's just a post-70s Rhodes, just the bass end. So it's really easy and honestly a great beginner's guide to the Rhodes and repairing the Rhodes, because it's only 32 keys, you have a lot less parts, a lot less cost, and a lot less manpower to maintain rather than a full 73 key keyboard. but you're not here for a 73 key keyboard review, so I'm going to stop there. Along with parts not being available, it's also a lot harder to regulate and get things back to factory when there isn't a lot of info on what factory was. You have a Facebook group, you have the Rhodes Restoration Facebook group, fan page, which are great resources with a lot of really knowledgeable people, more knowledgeable than me. And even they are pretty stumped when it comes to certain things which may or may not have been factory mods or post-factory mods. So you're kind of in the dark when it comes to getting things to where they were, which usually isn't a problem unless you're like a Raymond Zarek cover band. But it can be a little difficult when you're trying to do things by the book and there isn't a book. Granted, there are Rhodes guides online, like on the Rhodes.com service manual, but those are all primarily for the post-70s keyboards. Wrapping it all up when it comes to tone, I have to give the victory to the pre-70s piano bass. It's just something with the felt hammer tips and the harder Rimac tines that do make it feel like a more authentic upright bass rather than the post-70s bass tone. I definitely lean more towards the feel of the post-70s bass, but in terms of tone, I do believe this is a lot more refined, and if you don't want a little bit of a more natural tone with some imperfections, I would definitely go towards the post-70s. It's really there, and you can get it pretty close to how the pre-70s sounds with a lot less of the price and hassle. So without further ado, thank you for watching, and we'll get to the video clips.